So I'm Stefan Tompson. We're here in a series of discussions with experts from all 12 3Cs countries. And today we're speaking with Dr. Viktor Eszterhai from Hungary. And this is a very interesting conversation because obviously Hungary has a little bit of a controversial reputation at the moment. And it's gone from being a key sort of Polish ally and friend to a definite sort of uh, colding. There's been the relations have been a little bit more difficult recently, which makes this conversation actually very interesting. But maybe we'll start with Victor. Could you tell us a little bit about it, yourself, your work, just to give us an idea of who you are, what you're working on? That would be great.
Yeah, my name is Viktor Eszterhai. I'm mostly focusing on China, but in a bigger frame, my major interest is connectivity platforms. So how connectivity can be used in order to achieve some political aims. So this is my major interest, and in this regard, of course, I have an interest in regional connectivity platforms like Free Seas initiatives as well.
Sure. So the broad aims of the discussions are to understand where we stand economically, where the relations are going. Maybe if you could tell us a little bit about, from your perspective, from Hungary's perspective, the current state of economic cooperation within the region, especially within the Three Seas region.
Uh, well, if we want to define this issue, of course, we should separate the free sea initiatives and the economic relations because both are not necessarily the same. In Hungary,
Sure.
we generally see that the major issue of the region is that we have a dual characteristics of our economics that partially we are incorporated to the global capitalist structures via the German value chains. So this is the major uh, foot of our economy or major leg of our economy. And in this regard, this is quite similar in most of the countries in the region. And from another point of view, the other leg of our economy is the small and medium sized, mostly in the case of Hungary, but in other Central Eastern European countries, are the local companies who are less competitive, have less access to technology and capital. So we have this duality. And when we are talking about the Free Seas initiative, is that we have to keep in mind this special characteristic of the region that, from one point of view, the best would be to somehow connect these lesser developed leg of our economy with each other. So we see the potential of, in this, but we have to be rational at the same time that majority of our economic production is produced by the multinational leg of the region and also, or if I say the global value chains of the region. So that's, I think, the current state which is necessary to define.
Sure. It's an interesting answer. It's actually quite different to previous ones. I mean, they're definitely this sort of, that's an interesting way of defining the matter at hand. And in the sense of, obviously we've been seeing over the last few months, there's a massive realignment of the in some ways, the geopolitical order. Obviously, the invasion of Ukraine by Russia has been a major shift in European politics. And with it, of course, there's a number of obviously challenges have appeared, but also opportunities. And it'd be interesting to see from a Hungarian perspective. The Hungarians are obviously known for something that is usually called a sort of multi-vector foreign policy. It'd be very interesting to see from a Hungarian perspective what the current opportunities, given the geopolitical context and this realignment happening. What do you think the opportunities are? And then if we could contextualize them also afterwards, because on one hand there's obviously the opportunities for Hungary, on the other hand there's opportunities for the region, and they're not necessarily the same, right?
Yeah, just in a nutshell, I would like to give the the background of this multi-vector foreign policy, because probably it's not clear for all of us. After the financial crisis in 2008, it was recognized by the Hungarian government that we are, despite part of the West, this was not necessarily just simply a success story for Hungary, because we are still underdeveloped compared to the rest of Europe. So we somehow have to break out from this semi-peripheral status. And in this regard, the Hungarian government recognized that there is a multipolarization process is going in the international arena. So, and especially those countries who recognize it faster than Hungary uh, uh, could uh, could survive the financial crisis with better conditions. So the idea was that to recalibrate the geostrategic direction of Hungary and to focus on those emerging poles of the global economy. And this is, I have to underline that this is mostly an economic and pragmatic approach. But of course, this was oiled with better political relations with China, with Russia, and some others. So this was the major aim, is to make a bit better political relationship in order to provide more opportunities for the Hungarian economy. So there was a wish to attract more investments from China, from Russia, and from all these emerging countries like Turkey and so on. And of course, to increase the trading opportunities of Hungary. So that was, in a nutshell, the multi-vector foreign policy of Hungary. And of course, as you just highlighted, this has bad days now due to the due to the Russian-Ukrainian war, because it puts Hungary in a strategic dilemma. The dilemma is very clear. Uh, the Hungarian government would like to go back to the pre-war era and to continue globalization, to do business with other emerging poles, because they think that this is beneficial for the Hungarian economy. So it's a very pragmatic approach. And of course, if I understand well the situation, the Hungarian government is not blind, understanding the growing competition between China and the United States, the issue with Russia, obviously, is here. But there is still some hope that it's possible to go back to the pre-war era, which I can highlight as a hyper globalization period. So they still believe that it's possible. Or, and there is a growing danger that there will be a new phase in the global circumstances or the international circumstances of Hungary, and we are stepping into a deglobalization period or a regionalization of globalization, which most of the uh, most of the those guys who are behind this multi-vector foreign policy fear very much, because they see less economic opportunities. So you highlighted that there is a strategic dilemma here, of course, in Hungary, and what could be, how can Hungary grab the new opportunities? Well, uh, this scenario is not portrayed in most, in if I understand well, in the Hungarian government as mostly as a good opportunity, but mostly as a danger. So they fear the new world, because this will be more Cold War style way of thinking in blocks. Uh, the only beneficiary issue could be that some of the value chains would be shortened, and within Europe, Hungary is providing one of the most competitive place to invest by for example, like the German value chains. So, but the opportunities you mentioned seems to be very limited for a very open and so much integrated country to the global economic structures as Hungary.
Because a lot of the region is certainly seeing the conflict and the invasion as um, the obviously the eastern countries of the EU have massively gained in importance. The Baltics, Poland, Czechia, Slovakia, Romania, Bulgaria, these um, NATO border countries, EU border countries, they've seen a massive growth of importance in political weight. Um, they've suddenly become major strategic points. And I think to many leaders and to many politicians within the region, this has become an opportunity also to accelerate certain processes that was happening rather slowly, but happening nonetheless. So these massive infrastructure projects, all of this becomes that much more important because of the geopolitical context, which in many ways becomes an opportunity rather than a challenge for the region. That there is a sense of suddenly the point of view and the warnings about Russia that were coming out of especially countries like Poland or the Baltic Three. Suddenly, von der Leyen says we should have listened to the Baltic countries. We should have listened to Poland, and the Prime Minister of Finland comes out with similar statements. It's interesting because Hungary suddenly finds itself in a position where it was one of the four Visegrad four states, and an important ally of Poland, which is the sort of the tip of the spear in leading the efforts of the three Seas. And suddenly we find ourselves almost at odds with each other, right?
Well, if I understand well the situation here in Hungary, we are not very happy that this is happening. Despite there is much more attention on the region, actually, we don't really see that this is a good opportunity to grab it because what we see is that will have no access to the basic resources, which was a very important part of our competitiveness. So what we are talking about is sanctioning, for example, gas, which means a very tragic economic and political situation for for the whole country because that's also on the table. So we I don't really see anything to celebrate in this. Second, we can give up and restructure somehow our economy, but on the first level we have to pay much more on gas and on oil, and these have a tragic impact on our trade balance. So that's our current problem. This also add inflation. So this is fueling inflation. This is generating tremendous economic problems. So compare this with bigger attention on the global arena on this region. It's I mean I think it's hard to compare. Second, if I understand well, I mean the government they care more about the reality and not the possibility. So in this case, I mean, we used to live in a globalized world, and in this competitiveness is very important. And anything what we do currently is to find alternatives of, for example, Russian gas, Russian oil, and others. This takes a lot of money, takes a lot of investment, and this will bite in our competitiveness in the long term. And for example, in Hungary, we think that the real danger is competing with, in economic sense, with China, for example. But if we produce energy, if we produce electricity much more expensive, I think this will bite into our competitiveness. This will destroy our industrial production, not in Hungary, just but also in whole Europe. So we don't. I don't really see how those kind of economic opportunities can be balanced this tragic outcome of the situation when, for example, there will be bigger access or get better access to EU funds to have the connectivity between Slovakia, Poland, or Hungary. This cannot balance the harm what we have to face in the next couple of months. So, and I think, or at least this should be also part in the discussion. But nobody's really talking about this kind of, I think, hard facts.
Sure. Interesting. So in that sort of setting, from that position of what I assume is defined as or is defined in Hungarian political discourse as Hungary's national interest and the pursuit of Hungary's national interest, what does what role does the three C's um, suddenly have given that context, and given how you define the Hungarian national interest? I mean, is there suddenly a situation where our aims no longer align, um, because of the stance of the majority, the vast majority of the three Seas countries, uh, regarding Russia, regarding sanctioning gas and oil, um, and their whole realignment of their energy policies? Right? Is there suddenly what happens next?
Mhm. Well, generally, Hungary, of course, welcome all kinds of connectivity platforms because one of the major strategy in Hungary is to, despite the small size of the country, to make a hub. Hungary in most of the types of connectivities, like logistic. The government also wanted to make Hungary's kind of an energy hub with implementing the interconnectors and to make a hub of the whole energy network within the region. So generally, we say Hungary welcomes all types of connectivity platforms. But regarding the free sea initiatives, there are two major aims. So one is to strengthen the north-south corridor. So I mentioned to you that this is maybe not as relevant to balance all the harm we have to face in the next years. But of course, this is relevant, and this is a long-term standing desire for Hungary to strengthen the north-south relations, especially in hard infrastructure. Second, of course, we would be very much happy to also provide an alternative to the energy connections away from Russia. So construction of the Baltic Sea, Adriatic LNG terminals, connecting the pipelines. So this is, of course, is also Hungary's interest to provide an alternative. So it's not like everything is perfect and everything is bad. So like of course Hungary is supporting all these efforts, but of course there are some serious problems what we have to face with. So first is that uh, the the amount of money what we're talking regarding the free sea initiatives is not really meet with the needs. So that's also a very big problem. So the politicians love to talk about and announce big things that yeah, we recalibrate the energy system or network of the whole region. But the fact is, for example, in the case of Hungary, the alternative is still very limited. So there is an LNG terminal in Croatia, but we cannot be sure that if there is a lack of gas in Europe, Croatia is really would give Hungary enough enough gas, not enough, but any gas to Hungary. So so we see that there is money in this, but it still not really meets the interest. So there is an estimation. Everybody knows that like just the current projects should or the needs of the current projects are 170 billion euros, and the total commitments still around 1 billion euros. So there's a huge gap between the big announcements, big talks, and the reality. Second is that we still do not really see that why the private sector would be so much interested in these initiatives. So we still, I mean, there are some pessimistic voices that there should be some private investors, but it's still very limited. So there are of course big words that free democracies are providing safer return for investors, but where are these investors? So if I want to be very frank, uh, and also it's quite strange that, for example, the United States is supporting the initiative sometimes, but sometimes they are a bit hesitating, and then so it's a big we don't see that okay there is a full stream in this initiative. Of course, Hungary would be very much welcome to implement these projects. For example, Hungary has 17 projects registered to the initiative, the most among the member states in line with Croatia. So very much would be happy to implement these projects. But I think we have to be very realistic. And that's also a problem that most of the projects which could be implemented or started to be implemented are using EU funds. So not the own funds of the initiative. So these are also part of the picture. And I don't say that we should not be we should not find clear goals and follow the direction, but what I'm suggesting that we should be realistic.
So, what would, given all the things that you've said, and given obviously this very pragmatic approach, I think that's the right definition to Hungarian foreign policy. Um, What could be done to increase Hungary's interest in the Three Seas cooperation and in the Three Seas format as a whole? What would Hungary need, or what would they want to see from other Three Seas countries?
I think one of the major aim which was articulated years ago, that it would help the implementation of the projects if it would be institutionalized more. So that's one of the requests from the
What
Hungarian
could
government.
you expand on that?
So
What do you mean
the
by that?
Hungarian, of course, the Hungarian wish to establish a secretariat, and I would say one of the desire regarding this to establish the secretariat in Budapest. So that would of course help very much the Hungarian enthusiasm to support this initiative. Uh, I I think the Hungarian side would very much welcome if more companies could be involved in also the planning process. So involve better the energy companies, for example. That would help a lot. So not just talking about visions, long-term visions, but because, for example, in the next few years we will have a lot of job to do together. So not wishful thinking is needed, but more the incorporation of those who are really doing the business and who have relevant information in implementation process as well. Uh, we also would be happy to act together within the EU with other countries to guide some more EU funds to help the implementation of this process. There is a huge gap in this regard as well. So that despite the initiative was established years ago, but this still not a relevant platform within the EU. So this should be, of course, somehow this should be helped, which means maybe less attention should be paid on politics, but more on the needs of the economy and pragmatic approach should be should be welcome from the at least from the Hungarian side, if I understand well the situation.
Hmm. Because I think, I mean, it's a very interesting situation we're in, where obviously from my Polish perspective, Hungary's always been seen as there's a very strong foundational myth of the Polish-Hungarian friendship. That myth has been, and I think it's one of these ideas that is essentially a myth more than a reality. I think in reality, Poles and Hungarians don't really know each other. There's a very famous English saying that says that good fences make good neighbors. The fence that we have is we have some, we don't have a direct border, which in some ways makes that essentially you don't have those sort of uh, those typical inter border complaints, for example, that we have with the Czechs, for example, um, or the Lithuanians, simply because at the end of the day we haven't really encroached on each other's territory, aside from the Austro-Hungarian partition of Poland, where Hungary played its role. But essentially, there is a sort of foundational myth of this Polish-Hungarian friendship, um, even though I think in reality we don't really know each other very well. And suddenly we've gone from having this great friendship and this political alliance within the European Union over the last few years, with the Law and Justice government and the Fidesz government in Hungary having similar aims and uh, similar aspirations within the European Union, especially politically, especially in the culture wars. And now suddenly we find ourselves completely at odds with each other. And there's perhaps this perspective in Poland, at least, of we look at Hungary and it's sort of this country that it agrees or it goes along with a format. So, for example, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, where Hungary's within it, but sort of at the end of the day is pursuing its own aim. And then you have the alliance with Nazi Germany, where, well, they're allies, but they're sort of doing their own thing. And then you see it again within the Soviet Union, and then you see it within the European Union. And then there's this perhaps this kind of reticence of looking at it now from a more especially given the last few months. We look at the three C's, and we go from this perspective of, oh, we have this goal, we have this structure, we're trying to essentially redress historic injustices, create the north-south axis, create the infrastructure that allow us to develop and become and take essentially our rightful place in the heart of Europe, in Central and Eastern Europe. And Hungary is kind of there in a very key strategic position. It's sort of it's the heartland alongside Austria. It really is the geographical heart of Europe. Um, and here we are with essentially a country in our midst that is essentially sort of pursuing a completely different policy. And that's kind of obviously my question to you is what, what comes next, as in, obviously we sort of we discussed, you said what you would need. um I guess the question I'm trying to really formulate is essentially is, does Hungary actually look at this format, you know there is a sense that Hungary is its own player and essentially is not really a team player. Perhaps, I mean, that might be a very sort of childish way of. Obviously, this interview is in a sort of at a not at an expert level, but it's more of a sort of attempting to popularize the subject and to kind of bring it to lay people, kind of to explain it really to sort of a non-expert audience.
Uh, I cannot say my words in the name of all the Hungarians or even the Hungarian government. But I will try to my personal addition in this.
Sure.
You mentioned several historical lessons, and if I understand well, in Hungary, the major historical lesson is that what we really have to do is try to seek our own interest. We've been part of several empires. We've been told several times what is the ideology, what will save the world, what will. It's Nazi ideology, it's communism, whatever. So everybody told what is good for Hungary. And at the end of the day, it always figure out that, oh, well, it's not that, not that black and white. So uh, from this point of view, we fully understand in Hungary that Poland has a different view on Russia. Used to have a different view on Russia, so we did not share the same view before the war, and it's, I think, quite fair to state this. But we don't necessarily have to share everything as a political or geopolitical vision as well. Uh, I think in Hungary we very much evaluate that we live in the European Union, but I think we have a right to say our own word, what kind of European Union we would like to have. So, because everybody knows, of course, what should be, what should be, what should be done by Hungary. But I think we have the right to have our own view. So, in this regard, maybe the issue is that the future of Europe is not necessarily seen in the same time, the same way in Poland and in Hungary. And it's not bad. I think it's normal. So we can manage this. And how does this affect this connectivity platform? What we're talking about, free sea initiatives? I think it's not that important. I mean, in Hungary, we are very much, of course, interested in building roads, diversify energy sources, and of course, so why should we not be able to work together? Just maybe we won't have a big vision behind these implementations and big, that this will change whole Europe. This will rewrite the role of the region within Europe, because we several times had previously these big visions, big ideals, big ideology, but we have to be very rational that this is really happening. This is this is this is on the table. So I don't want to be rude, but if the whole budget of the Free Seas Initiative is less than 1 billion euro, and that's the current amount, what we are talking about, really? So I mean, imagine. So compare it with a big corporate investment in Europe. This is some of money. So we should be very realistic. So we can tell stories to ourselves that we will be the big axis of the European Union in the future and blah blah blah. We will drive the reconstruction of Ukraine, but we have to be very realistic in this. So maybe we can guide EU somehow in some certain level. We can be, of course, an active player in the reconstruction of Ukraine, but we have to see the limitations in this. And of course, for Hungary, I think this means that always have to pay attention on its own interest. So that's it.
And a final question, Victor, is what are the sort of obviously the turmoil that has happened? It's the last few months we've suddenly seen a massive. I mean, this huge shift has happened, right? There's I mean everything has really changed, and it's this is coupled with very severe inflation across the continent and across the West in general, as well as potentially there's an upcoming recession coming. That there is all the economic signals are there that we're heading towards an economic crisis very soon, and also we have the energy crisis with rising prices, and we have a winter that's about to start. So there's a lot of change that is going to happen in the next few months in the sort of short term. What are the sort of long term? Because I understand the Hungarian position. I think you've explained it very clearly and very succinctly. And but obviously this is all short term, right? I mean we're talking about that this is the war has been going on for just over 6 months now. Um, and what is the outlook say for in a medium to long range geopolitically for Hungary? I mean, what would the end play here be? Say, within 5, 10, 15 years, and up to a generation time. So sort of a time span that's relevant to us personally having this discussion.
Uh, well, what it seems as clear uh, possibilities for the next couple of months, uh, I would also question. So maybe the direction of Europe can can change in the next couple of months because I believe in this that there will be lack of resources. This lack of resources will undermine the solidarity within the EU, despite all the big talks of the politicians. We will see a very similar scenario as we could see with COVID, when the European countries were fighting with each other for masks and some other half stuff, and there was no solidarity. And later in the vaccine, and of course there was, but at the beginning, so when everything turned bad, we did not see the solidarity. Uh, so maybe create this will create political maybe this will create political changes. So I would suggest to ourselves that uh, we should wait with this midterm predictions. So first, what is very important? How will the war end? We don't know. We simply don't know. So we have hopes that could be maybes, but we don't know what will be the end of this war. I even don't see what is the goal of most of the European countries in this war. In Hungary, it's very simple. We would like to have peace as fast as possible because as I mentioned at the beginning, we would like to turn back to normal, if I understand well, the intention of the government. So we still hope that it's possible somehow to go back to the pre-war normal, and it will be extremely hard. So I think that's very unlikely. So, but there is still some hope for this. So first, we have to wait. What will be the end of the war? Second, what will be the political landscape of the whole European Union in the next couple of months? So, can we be sure that this will be the same? I need to just wait. What is happening in Italy? So that's the first thing. And if these are figured out, maybe we would be in a better position to give a midterm prediction. If I understand well, what would be the Hungarian position in this is that we would like to have a stronger Europe. I mean, the Hungarian government would like to have a stronger Europe, but it's not necessarily a more united Europe. With regard that the sovereignty of the states should be, member states should be somehow maintained. I think it's also, if I understand well, the way of thinking of the Hungarian government, it is also quite uh, sure that EU institutions should do their own job, which they have, uh, how to say, which they have, which they received uh, legal uh, confirmation by the voters, and not acting independently and not trying to fight for new laws. So I think that's also very important for the Hungarian government to keep the EU institutions as they used to be. Uh, and based on this, of course, Hungary would like to have a bigger voice in direction of Europe, but we will see how realistic is this. And then, at the end of the day, we think that it's possible to strengthen Europe based on these, or also with these preconditions. And we would like to welcome a more uh, independent Europe in also in the global arena. So EU should seek its own interest and have to rethink the relationship. I think it's very good. Of course, we have strong partners, we have allies, but we have to rethink the whole uh, strategic outlook of the European Union, because I also believe in this that the Russian-Ukrainian war will be a new phase in the global geopolitical arena. So, and I hope that EU is not going in this without rethinking and recalibrating its strategic aims, its strategy, and also how do they want to implement it. So if I understand well the Hungarian view on this, we would like to welcome a more uh, autonomous European Union, but we will see.
Victor, thank you so much for the perspective and for the Hungarian perspective. Obviously, we Poland and Hungary aren't aligned on this, but it's always very interesting to exchange views and to hear how other member states think about these issues. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it, and all the best. And obviously, we shall see in a few months, in a few years. Um, Time will tell. Thank you again. Thanks,
Thank you very
Victor.
much. I
Thank you.
appreciate it. Goodbye.
Bye.